a book introduction, something that we can all, relate with in our lives in one way or the other. And we've always heard about this topic and, had our own questions about it, apprehensions about it. And we're really lucky that, we have noted, professionals in this industry for decades together who are here to support us and address it and look at how we can, clear our misconceptions. So, without further ado, a warm welcome on behalf of the Eyebrows Book Club. And today's book that will be featured is Ayurveda, The True Way to Restore Your Health and Happiness by Dr. G. Gangadharan. And the session will be in conversation with Dr. Sujata Kelkar Shetty. A warm welcome on behalf of the Eyebrows Book Club of Catholic Club to you both. I would now like to request our subcommittee member, Vinita Sambuchetti, to kindly deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Vinita.
Thank you. Thank you, Samira. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Catholic Club Eyebrows Meet. Today we are in discussion with Dr. G. Gangadharan regarding his book, Ayurveda, The True Way to Restore Your Health and Happiness. This book is not a defense of Ayurveda, a sound scientific framework of healthcare that has saved...
I cannot hear you.
Vinita, you'll have to put off your phone.
I
You can
cannot
put
hear
someone
you.
else.
Yeah, if the phone is
Too many
on-
phones.
Now
Yeah.
better?
Yeah, there's
Yes.
no echoing now.
Okay, thank you. I'll start again. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Catholic Club Eyebrows Meet. Today we are in discussion with Dr. G. Gangadharan regarding his book Ayurveda, The True Way to Restore Your Health and Happiness. This book is not a defense of Ayurveda, a sound scientific framework of healthcare that has saved countless lives over 5,000 years, does not need defenders. It needs champions and to be given wings. Dr. G. Gangadharan, who has been researching both the theory and practice for the past 35 years, shows in his book the logic behind the science. He points out that our bodies are intelligent systems designed to keep most diseases at bay. But we must pay more attention to the signals they give us. Doing so comes with the implicit promise of true restoration. Ayurveda has so much to offer. Its simple application can transform daily life. In this book, you will find that healthcare must address the individual as a whole and not just the disease. Let's see if this holds true. I now hand over to Samira Fernandez.
Thank you, Vinita, and it is my proud honor to welcome Dr. G. Gangadharan to this, book introductory session today. Well, I've just received a copy of his book. I don't know if you can see it, but that's behind me. And I think it's a beautiful book from what I see, well designed, well crafted, and truly very, very interesting to read at the same time. Dr. G. Gangadharan has been a champion of Ayurveda for the last 3.5 decades. He is the author of 3 research papers, 12 research articles, 13 primary papers, and 6 books. As a renowned expert on lifestyle diseases, he has conducted training programs in the US, at UK, Germany, France, China, South Africa, Kenya, Nepal, Italy, and Hong Kong, in addition to India. During his career, he has collaborated with social organizations, corporate organizations, government think tanks, and international agencies that are interested in improving healthcare. After his 7.5 year Ayurveda Charya course from Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu, he acquired a master's degree from McGill University in Montreal, Canada. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Ashoka Innovators for the Public Fellowship. He has a PhD from Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapeeth Pune in management of rheumatoid arthritis. But most importantly, he is here at our very own Ramaya Medical College. Dr. Gangadharan, if you can tell me more. I believe you are currently practicing right here in Bangalore. Sorry, I think we've just lost him, but that is about Dr. Gangadharan, and we will come back to more. Now, may I request our committee member to, sorry, just a moment. We have a lot of people in the waiting room who are, I think, waiting to come in. Yes, okay. So we've just let all of them in so that they can join us in the conversation. I hope Dr. Gangadharan has also come in by now.
Yes, I am here.
Lovely, lovely. So doctor, I was just trying to end my statement talking about what is it that you currently do now. So you're practicing. Can you tell us where exactly?
Yeah, I am the founder director of an 100-bed hospital located in MS Ramaya Institute, which is a well-known care center in Bangalore in Mattikere and New Bell Road. And this is the hospital which is NABH accredited. 2014, I took over the establishment of this thing. Before that, I have been in Bangalore and the director of Indian Institute of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine,
Great.
which was supported by Tata, and I took over clinical work in this place in 2014.
Yeah, so a warm welcome to you, Dr. Gangadharan. And now let us move on to our subcommittee member, Lunita Desa, who will proudly introduce our moderator, the special guest, Dr. Sujata, who will be in conversation with Dr. Gangadharan. Over to you, Lunita.
Thank you, Samira. Good evening to everyone. It's my honor to introduce the moderator for this evening. We have in our midst Dr. Sujata Kelkar Shetty, who studied in the US as a trained and biological scientist. She did her postgraduate training from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, Bethesda. While at the National Institute of Health, she was curious about the interaction between the mind and body and studied how mental stress negatively impacts our physical health. Dr. Sujata also used to write a preventive health column for Mint, the leading business newspaper. Her book, 99 Not Out, A Guide to a Long, Healthy Life, was published by Penguin Random House. She conducted many workshops for big corporates like Infosys, PwC, TCS, and EY. Dr. Shetty is an ICF certified life coach. She has a BSc degree in genetics from the University of Wisconsin and a PhD in toxicology from the University of Kentucky. I could go on, but I've been given a limited time today, and definitely this is all I can say about a vibrant and dynamic moderator. Over to you, Samira.
May we request Dr. Sujata Kelkar Shetty to kindly lead the discussion with Dr. Gigi Gangadharan, who's the director from the Ramaya Institute. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Gigi for several reasons. You know, one, I like to think of myself as a champion of Ayurveda. Two, I'm a friend of Dr. Gangadharan's. I'm blessed that way. And I'm also blessed because he has been my doctor for many years and has helped me alleviate diseases that Western medicine considers chronic. So I'm a huge fan of his work, of his medical work, and I've seen him in action, and I've seen Ayurveda in action, which has made me make Ayurveda the first point of contact, because for many people in India, Ayurveda is the last point of contact. They first try other, modes of medicine, usually Western medicine, and then they'll finally go to Ayurveda as a last resort. And when I was at his clinic the last time, one of his junior doctors said to me, there's a patient in the next room, and he said, I wish this gentleman had come to us 15 years ago when his issue first came up. He came to us 15 years later after he had tried all these other avenues, and now he wants us to fix him. And I think that's one of the frustrations with our fabulous system, that people are unaware of its of the magic it can do for us. But anyway, we have the man himself who's going to talk to us more about it. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the questions. And the book is beautiful, Dr. Gangadharan. It really is, and I'm looking forward to really sinking my teeth into it better. But your introduction has a line, and I wanted you to explain it to us, right? So it says every chapter in this book reinforces Ayurveda's founding principle of true restoration. And while I have some understanding of what that means, could you elaborate on that, please?
No, what I meant is, actually the body is in a dynamic equilibrium, state of dynamic equilibrium. It is not equilibrium, it's static. So what I meant is that every moment, the body itself is in a phase of degeneration and regeneration. That's what's happening. The cells are multiplying, tissues are growing. So the body is in constant change within and without. So what I meant is restoration, that when the changes in the environment, when the season changes, when the age goes up, the chronological order, in all this situation, the body has the beautiful system of self-organizing itself. That's what I meant. So the body, this is a new knowledge actually for a modern reductionistic point of view. We don't understand how body is reacting. Many of us are exposed to many kinds of contaminants, including virus, bacteria, all these kind of external things which can mutate your body's mechanism. But how body is is able to keep that equilibrium. That is what I meant. That is actually the cornerstone of Ayurveda, is the dynamic equilibrium that we are trying to maintain. When I give a decoction, when I tell you some changes in the lifestyle, when I tell someone to do this and that, I'm trying to see that imbalance being creeped into your system and trying to put it back. And it is always a constant, not struggle, constant dancing, I should say, because it is a beautiful thing. Life is a beautiful thing. So not struggle. It's a beautiful dancing happening inside to keep the body healthy state of status.
Yeah. What I love about Ayurveda is its respect for the human body. It really respects the human body and mind and its ability to regenerate. And to that point, your second chapter is about, it's titled The Whole Plant and Whole Person. And from that, I understand that it means using the whole plant rather than using, an isolated synthesized variant to treat a person. Because then we do away with the potential side effects. But is there more to this when you talk about the whole plant, whole person hypothesis?
Yeah. What I meant is, we say that take the man as a whole, take the plant as a whole, and treat the man as a whole. What I mean is that actually Ayurvedic medicine is medicine with intelligence, and modern medicine is medicine like a bullet. That is the thing I give, because the medicine works with intelligence. It knows where to work, where not to work. So when you isolate a biomolecule from a whole plant, we are losing that intelligence of that substance. We are mutilating it, we are distorting it, and you make a biomolecule which is capable, very strong, but it can it damage your system in a long time. That's why we proudly say that Ayurveda medicine does not have these side effects. The reason is that we are taking the whole thing so that it can work you can use its intelligence to work in that. The best example I can quote you that we give very commonly Triphala. Triphala is a churnam, it's a powder. We give in different form. In my book, I have given 11 way of using Triphala with different vehicles, with the ghee, with the honey, with the oil, as a powder, as a mushy, as a decoction, as a ghee, so many methods of same material. So if you analyze in your lab, you see the triple I is the same material, but when it goes to the body with different vehicles, it works in different way. So all chapter, second chapter, I am devoting to bring this point to the people's mind clearly that why we use whole plant and why this different kind of kalpanas, pharmacological dosage forms. This is to make that work in its holistic way. One of the reasons for telling Ayurveda is a holistic science is that we take the plant as whole, we treat the person as whole. And we believe there is actually a physician is actually a conveyor belt between the macro and the micro. The duty of physician is that collect the appropriate thing needed at that point of time for the person and convert it in a form so that body can absorb it. So it is actually a conveyor belt. And we use everything from the external universe.
That's beautiful. So what you're telling me is that the way that you administer it matters, because in Western medicine, when they give you a pill, they say take it with orange juice, take it with water, take it with a glass of milk. They don't make that distinction, but you say it matters.
It does matter. The reason why what I explained to you is that the reason is that the human system, human body, or in that respect, living bodies, anything that is a plant or animal or any bird or a human being, it is actually a replica of external universe. Both are made of same substances, the Panchamahabhutas. What we do is appropriately collecting and correcting and putting into the system to bring back the dynamic equilibrium which is maintained in the body. So we don't mutilate. That's why we say Ayurveda medicines are medicines with intelligence.
Yeah, Ayurveda medicines are medicines with intelligence. I like that. Your third chapter, speaks of the 6 stages of disease, and you also mentioned that Ayurveda has this unique ability as a science and an art, if you allow me to call it that, to detect a disease at its earliest stage. So how does it do that? I mean, how is it that it can do that? Because in Western medicine, you need certain diagnostic tools, and it really depends on the diagnostic tool, depends on the disease. But how is it that we can say that with so much confidence about every single disease out there?
Actually, this is one of the very unique features of Ayurveda, one of them. And we understand that each disease goes through 6 stages. And the first stage may not give you the all full-blown symptoms. Symptoms are seen only when it reaches 4th, 5th, or 6th stage, which as you told me, that patient came 15 years later when it has reached the 6th stage, which is Bheda, the chronic, and it has given rise to damage of tissues and organs already. So Ayurveda has got a method which has got a Dashavidha Parishad, 10 methods of examining a patient. We don't examine the disease. Disease examination is different. Patient examination is different. So these 10 methods of Lushyam, Desham, Balam, Kalam, Manilam, Prakitim, Vaya, Sattvam, Sarpyam, Padaharam. These 10 factors are very different from person to person. That's why we say that we treat patient, not the disease. The disease entity may be same in 10 patients, but 10 patients we may give little different medicines because of the 10 variants that individualize a person from other person. So here, this 10 method helped me to find out a disease in early stage. For example, diabetes. Diabetes is a condition which is not that your HbA1c become above 7 all of a sudden on fine morning when you get up. This would have started in 5 years before. So there are some symptoms that will give rise that. If you are able to understand symptom, one is lack of sweating, lack of increase in body weight. There are 11, 50, and there is lack of appetite, more of sweating. All these conditions, one stage, which will give an indication of a disease that can happen maybe after 1 month, depending upon the kind of disease you are going to prone. So this is mainly applicable for lifestyle diseases or metabolic disorders. This is not as clearly indicated in the disease of Agandu origin, which is due to infection. Infection diseases, these 6 stages can be rapid. one after another can quickly come. Whereas other chronic metabolic disorders, these 6 stages can be a slow progression. And if a wise physician will be able to stop it in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th stage, so that it can completely bring back the dynamic equilibrium back to position. So, Sanjayam cha, Pragopam cha, Prasaram, Sthana Samshrayam, Vyakti Bedam, these are the 6 stages. Sanjayam is accumulation. Pragopam is from its natural place of origin, it spreads to other places. Sthana Samshrayam is getting located in one area. Maybe it is locating to your liver, maybe locating to your heart, locating to pancreas, or locating to your mouth, wherever the disease can happen. Like that, we understand each stages. So I think this chapter is very important to understand the depth and the depth of the science. How people think that Ayurveda has got very primitive diagnostic tools. Actually, these tools are very highly refined tools, provided the physician has the wisdom to understand that by knowing the symptom. So these six stages are very unique. And I have told in the end of my chapter, it will be great if modern science come to handhold Ayurveda and vice versa. These 6 stages can be understood by some kind of markers, biomarkers. These days we use very markers for cancer. We have got cancer CA125 for uterus cancer. Different markers are identified, but it's the later stage. If you are able to understand these biomarkers, it is easy from a lab. I can say that I am prone to this disease because the symptom which can be correlated with the modern biomedical measure.
That sounds amazing. I think it's sorely needed because to have access to this kind of diagnostic capability for lifestyle diseases in a country like ours, where we're unfortunately reaching epidemic proportions of diabetes, heart disease, and the metabolic syndrome, I think it's really crucial that Ayurveda spread its wings, as you write. Now, the Prakriti and Genome chapter is particularly exciting to me because I studied some genetics in college, and that the intrinsic nature that's based on Vata, Pitta, and Kapha can be matched to a person's genome. I mean, it makes sense that there is a connection, but it's still great that evidence has been found for it, because now hopefully people will look towards Ayurveda more with greater with not just curiosity but hope. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, this chapter actually is based on a scientific paper published by a team of people, including me, in none other than the Nature, the epitome of modern publication, scientific publication. And they have to accept, without that 100% scientific rigor, they want to accept it. So this study, which took us 6 years and 3 centers in Bangalore, Udupi, and Pune, and around 3,500 people we went through their system, and we collected their blood and do these studies. This was done in collaboration with my institute, Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, NMCB in Hyderabad, Manipal University, and such organizations, and 3 Ayurveda institutions. What we have done is, there was the basic premises of Ayurveda is Prakriti. Because when I see you first time, I say you are a Pitta predominant person. I say he's a Vata predominant person. How I say, I have got so many physiological and psychological characteristics. There are around 75 aspects are there.
Wow.
This physician to find out 75 aspects of each dosha is a great effort, and it needs a lot of experience and practice. And with a lot of effort, we made a software by the CDAC Pune to do this objective analysis of Prakriti of each person using a questionnaire with weightage. So we used 3,000 people, and we could get only 300 not people with single Prakriti, Vata predominant, Pitta predominant, Kapha predominant. And we found that these 3 categories of people out of 3,000, we got only 10% as a single pure Prakriti. Others are joint Prakriti, which we cannot we can analyze, but it will take more time and efforts. So this we found that there is more than 52 SMPs which is single nucleotide peptides, and which are very unique to Pitta Prakriti. And we have found that same is the case with unique thing Kapha Prakriti. So this was a mind-boggling thing that there is a genetic basis for Prakriti. Prakriti is not an imagination of existence of Ayurveda. It is a biological factor.
Yes.
And Prakriti can be determined. And we say in Ayurveda that Shukrarthavaste Janmado Vishayaneva Vishakrama. At the time of fertilization of egg with the sperm, the Prakriti happens. That's what genetics also say. Once that Prakriti happens, it can never change. It changes only when you disintegrate back to the soil.
Which
So
is
this was tried
exactly,
to
I mean, it totally mirrors the truth based on the genomic analysis.
Yes. So this was the paper, and it was one of the, I think, first paper in the history of Ayurveda that came to Nature. It was not even questioned by after 6 years, and it was in 2016. And the Ayurveda part was being managed by me and with few others. So this chapter I want to bring home. People think that Ayurveda is not a science with rigor. Ayurveda is very kind of because of their lack of exposure. I don't blame any of them because we don't have anything in our education system. In our society, there is no mechanism to convey this kind of knowledge to people. So we are all dealing with our roots. So we don't have this kind of understanding. So this chapter I am devoting to show how rigor the science of Ayurveda is and how it can even meet the standards, whatever the standard. I don't say to the epitome of standard, but some kind of objective standards and objective understanding of modern science can be met by this method. So this was done under the program called Ayurveda Biology. See, biology itself is very much misunderstood. There is a biology based on Ayurvedic principles. So there was a lot of program we did under the guidance of Padma Vibhushan Dr. M.S. Valiyathan, who actually initiated this program, and I was part of as an Ayurveda thing. That we made a lot of studies. This is one among the studies. There are so many other studies we did which successfully got published. But this genome and Ayurveda is a very interesting area, and it has been highly applauded for its scientific rigor.
Yeah, I mean, for good reason. I think, I think this is a chapter for skeptics. So anyone who is a skeptic should make sure they read this chapter because it really it brings home the point about Ayurveda. You don't need any other explanation. The next question I had for you is, Ayurveda's respect for the gut is awe-inspiring, right? Again, when we contextualize it with the Western medical perspective, what medical science is recently finding out, I mean, the last couple of decades at the most, I think the last decade actually probably, that the gut health is important in protecting us against a wide array of diseases and aging. Ayurveda has had an implicit understanding of that. And it's quite humbling as far as Western medical, the perspective is concerned. How does, and then you mentioned something about this, which I found interesting. And how does Ayurveda eliminate pathogens specifically while using the personalized medicine approach? So, Western medicine has the carpet bombing approach, and they have a medicine that they know will kill just about every bacteria in that class of bacteria. And you mentioned that Ayurveda can actually just eliminate the pathogen. But then Ayurveda is also acting specific to that individual. So how does it do both?
Yeah, this is actually this gut micro, the chapter itself is an eye-opener for people who want to know more about Ayurveda, because we have been telling gut is the basis of health. This was told thousands of years now. This gut microbiome came recently, more than 20-25 years. Now we see the gut is the second brain, or they say the gut is the place more important than the actual brain that we are referring. And the gut is invaded with a lot of organisms which are 3 times more than the actual human body cells. So actually speaking, we are actually represented by 3 times more of microbiomes in our system. So Ayurveda, there are 2 ways Ayurveda does. One is Ayurveda makes an environment in the body so that this pathogen can no more survive. This is what the Claude Bernard has told in the thing. internal milieu or milieu interior, or which show that body needs the pathogens cannot survive in certain media. So when body is different, changes its medium, then pathogen can grow. So Ayurveda selectively makes its condition in the body, biological condition in the body, so that this pathogen can no more survive, no more multiply, no more regenerate. So one of the methods we use, I have explained in my, is Vasti. Vasti is a kind of a wonderful treatment. Through the rectum, we gave kind of medicated things, and it stays in the system for 10 to 15, 20 minutes. And it's a method. There are very great science behind that. 8 days program, 14 days program, 30 days program, and different combinations. So in this, through these combinations, we eliminate this pathogen which are in the GIT, so that it cannot multiply, it cannot survive, and it slowly gets excreted from the body. That's what we do. And gut microbiome is not only in terms of health, even for our psychological status, psychological conditions also governed by. So another study that we have recently done, which is getting concluded and got published, is gut microbiome and the Prakriti. Actually, each Prakriti has got a different kind of gut microbiota. The microbiota, there are more than 60 species, which is dominated, but there are more than that. Each species has got its own way of influencing your body. This is a very nascent science. As on today, we have to study more to understand how it is affecting. So, for example, Tribala. Tribala is one of the purgatives we use. Tribala Churnam, when you use it as a purgative, it will not disturb your intestinal flora at all, whereas it can remove the pathogens in the system selectively. That is its pharmacological action. That's why with the Tribala, we equate equal to 10 mothers. That much care is given by Tribala to the human system.
A lot of food for thought. I hope everyone's rushing to get that Tribala from from the Ayush pharmacy. My father just asked me for a stock, and I'm waiting for the lockdown to be over so I can courier it to him. Now, I want to talk to you about lifestyle, right? I know that, given Ayurveda's holistic basis, a lot of emphasis is given on lifestyle as well. So if you could elaborate on the role of nutrition, physical exercise, and the importance of mental, habits in healing. I know it's a big question, and maybe you could want to break it up.
It's a little big question only, but I think this Dinacharya, Rudacharya, and Sadvrata, these are three components. Ayurveda is basically a preventive and promotive medicine than a curative medicine. Basically, it gives that much importance to. And how it supplies these tools is through the three mechanisms of Dinacharya, daily routine, Rudacharya, seasonal routine, and lifestyle changes, Sadvrata. Sadvrata is how mentally you should shape yourself. That's very important. If a sick mind cannot have a healthy body, as per Ayurveda. A sick mind is starting point of many things. That's why the first sloga, my first chapter, starts with the Raga Rogan. That's the first line in Ayurvedic treatise. Raga is actually an aberration of mind. Raga, Dvesha, all the Shadribus, 6 enemies of mind. Raga is attachment. Your attachment to certain things, certain people, certain environment, certain food, certain habits are the starting point of any aberration of the mind. Raga. So Ragam can influence your mind. That mind can influence your body. So Ayurvedic lifestyle changes are two-way important. One is the physical importance, which can give. We say that there are two things Ayurveda particularly says. That is, one is Vyayamam, daily exercise, and Abhyangam, daily oil massage. Even if you cannot do oil massage every day, massage of the body, because it can do three things. One is the cutaneous nerves get stimulated, the circulation gets stimulated, and muscles get the tone, and skin also gets. So a person who is doing everyday massage, his aging is actually delayed. Aging process is actually delayed. So this This is Vyayam. This Abhyanga is a very simple thing. We don't even do these days because it has gone out of our daily schedule. So the Dinacharya starts with this kind of physical things with the right kind of food. Food, I don't want to go detail, but food is one of the important factors because food is what makes you what you are. So food, exercise, Abhyanga, sleeping on time, and right thinking. Right thinking does not mean that actually the Ayurveda gives one example that Swartha buddhi parartheshu paryaptam nidhi satvrutam. What it means that if you can develop a mindset of a selfish feeling for others' benefit, or when someone else get a benefit, you should feel as if something you got. Swartha buddhi parartheshu paryaptam nidhi satvrutam. And how great this thinking is that if you are able to convert ourselves from our narrow-mindedness to reach the whole society, whole country, whole globe, and we say that Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam or Loga Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. This concept is actually, it is not a bland concept. It's a concept based on a very great health philosophy behind that. Health cannot be achieved by nutrient food. Health cannot be achieved by few vaccinations that you do seasonally. Health can achieve only when the mind and body is in tune with the external universe. And you should feel that you are in a state of ananda. That state of ananda bliss comes only when you relate yourself with your mind, body, senses, with the external universe. So this is seen not only Ayurveda, a health science, in all sciences originated in ancient roots, not only in India. You can see that we relate. So recently I was talking to a biodiversity congress. What is biodiversity? Biodiversity is part of us. And when we kill that, our climate change, the recent epidemic, more problematic area than epidemic is the climate change. We are seeing it. The Bengal Ocean never got a flood. Now we are getting flood from there also, from Tufan from there also. A lot of changes are happening because we are not respecting the environment.
Absolutely.
We are not tuned with the environment.
Absolutely. I think it's funny how, I mean, not funny, it is tragic for so many of us, but it's interesting how the only species affected by the coronavirus is human beings. Nature is saying, you need to sit at home now. All the other species are flourishing while we're all sitting at home. It's, yeah.
Also, there is a big theory that corona has come from the wild because the wild areas got discriminately haunted and destroyed, and many inhabitants that area could not survive there, came to human mutation and started spreading one area. And our India actually is not human-centric. We are only part of the nature. We are not center of the nature. Nature can survive without us, but we cannot survive without nature. So we are one among the nature elements. But we have taken a position that we are the center. Everything is for us. We started invading the forest. We started invading the depth of the oceans. We started invading the rivers. We started putting bunds everywhere. We eroded the soil. We removed the plants. We removed the green cover.
All raga, no? All raga.
So raga, the raga, and Sapadana Shaktan. So all the raga, shad ribus, 6 ribus are invading us. And more we are invaded, more and more we become unhealthy.
My next question, actually, you already answered, because I was going to say, you know, how are modern consumption habits impacting our health? But I think we covered that with, you know, with your answer. So now it's more about, you know, given the power of Ayurveda, why is it that its reach and its influence has been so limited?
Yeah, actually, I am addressing that in the last chapter to some extent. Limits of Ayurveda. One of the things is that, see, we have not invested enough in the research. We are not invested enough in the institutional building. We are not invested enough invested even after post-independent enough in the re-earthing the truths that are there in the Ayurveda. As on today, what you see as Ayurveda is only 10% of Ayurveda. 90% of Ayurveda to me is waiting to be explored. You know, there are more than 100,000 written manuscripts available as on today in different languages in India, which is being recorded. We don't know how much is not recorded. How much we have read about, not more than 200. So the vast ocean of knowledge that's lying to be, and it is pity that we are sitting on that without doing anything on that. It is like the Gardhava, the ass, the monkey, the donkey, which is carrying on its back both sides heavy weight of gold and sandalwood, and thinking that donkey thinking that how can I get rid of this weight? Because mass is the only virtue, not the donkey. It doesn't understand the value of that two things which is carrying. Like Indians, we are carrying such a great, noble, useful things for the future society. We are not unearthed it. So we are satisfied with a few practitioners. Why Ayurveda alive today? Not because of a great institution, just because few individuals, they devoted their life and they are practicing corners and corners of Indian villages, are surviving, not because of an institution. So what is investment? We don't have single IIT kind of institution. We don't have one IIM kind of institution. We don't have ICMR kind of institution. You know, the India's budget for Ayush, including which I have mentioned in my book, is lesser than All India Institute of Medical Science 1 year budget. Delhi All India Institute of Medical Science, one institution, the one campus spends more than what Ayush Ministry sends all over the country for 1 year. And the budget of Ayurveda never gone above 2% of the total health budget. So you cannot expect a farmer to plow a land with a stick. You should be given a plow, if not a tractor. So nothing is, whatever you see today by God's grace is, some of us are working on that area, some of us do something. So Ayurveda is a sleeping giant, I should say. The giant has to be invoked and brought back, should be brought back into action. And there is no, it is not happening. I have very clearly, my last chapter is actually, you can see my tears in that chapter. As a physician, I am crying that that's what's happening. Even though we have got so far friendly government in the center who are supposed to do this, but it is not happening the way we want it.
I hope things change. I really do, because I'm of course a big believer in Ayurveda and a passionate advocate. Could you take some time to just bust a few myths of Ayurveda for the audience in case they don't get a chance to read the book? I would love for them to at least understand, that some things they know about Ayurveda are just myths.
There are many people think that Ayurveda is a science of vegetarianism. I am breaking it. It is not so. There are ample use of things, and Ayurveda believes in kind of a mid path. We don't go extreme. We are not vegans. We are not full-time meat eaters or anything. We have, because it's a science. It's not an emotional thing. It's not something to be gratified by your emotions, but it's a science. Science says that sarvakaryeshu madhyama, take the middle path. Don't go extreme. Extreme is not the way that the nature flourished. So take that second thing, people think it is science of Brahmins. Nothing to do with the caste system. Ayurveda is a lived science, the science of the people. And you can see hundreds and hundreds of regional texts in Ayurveda. And most of the exponents like Charaka, Sushruta, Vakpada, they are not at all Brahmin. They are all other. And Charaka is a walking monk. He doesn't have caste. He's above caste system. Vakpada is a well-known Buddhist. And Sushruta is a son of a king of Banaras.
Oh, I didn't know this. Okay.
Yeah. None of them are Brahmins. Of course, there are great Brahmins also, are some of that, but it is not. It's a real people science. God documented over years a science of higher evolution change. It has been evolving, and you can from Kashmir to Kerala, we have got different kinds of Ayurveda. The way Ayurveda being practiced in Kerala is different from the way it is practiced in Rajasthan, and it depends upon the place, ecosystem in which we are. We say that yasya deshastu yo jantu tasya tajavshadam. Every geographical place is blessed by nature with things which are needed for that area. So that is the new concept of eating from 100 kilometers gives you health is the right concept. We don't go and we don't have to go a Kashmir apple to satisfy the tongue of the Bangaloreans. We can have our own fruits this area, which is more suitable for your health and your body. So these are some of the science. Ayurveda is a complete science in terms of its health. And health is not a physical thing. Health is a physical, physiological, psychological, social, and spiritual being. And Ayurveda take all this aspect. Ayurveda will not advise a thing only for the physical. it says that it is in sync with other dimensions of life.
Yeah,
Because-
therefore naturally environmentally sustainable. Now, the movement is eat local, eat seasonal, but Ayurveda has been saying it for thousands of years. And the whole idea that it's, you're looking at yourself as a part of the whole rather than the one who controls it or owns it. But I think we should open the floor to our guests who've been watching patiently.
Yes.
Time for that, isn't it,
Sujata,
Shanti?
yeah. Dr. Sujata and Dr. Gangadhar, that was, an extremely illuminating and interesting discussion. So as you have said, let's open the floor. Rohini De Silva, is there any question that you would like to ask? I understand that you would like to ask some questions. Rohini, are you there?
Shanti, can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Yes.
please go ahead.
Good evening, doctor. I have a
evening.
son who has chronic cold. He gets up every morning with a terrible cold. And I've tried so many things. And the only thing the doctor said, this is chronic, this is rhinitis. And he's 21 years now. And, I feel very sad that, he gets up every day with a cold. And is COVID times, I'm so paranoid to take him out because everyone say, this guy's got COVID. So could you advise me as to what I could do to, at least control this thing?
It's a medical condition, but I'll tell you, this person must be having a lot of hair. That's one thing I feel. I have not seen the person, and he should be little bulky, second thing. And he must be eating a lot of milk products as a habit and cold items. These four things are there. That can be one of the reasons. Or else I have to see.
He's very thin, doctor. And
Okay.
yeah.
And a lot of hair.
Hair in what sense? On the head or the whole?
Yeah, in the head only.
Yes.
That is the other. One of the reasons for this chronic rhinitis is the head hair, which stays there, and it causes a kind of seeping in of when the person sweats. Sweat does not get dried out. It gets sink into the body and starting burn. Many people, when I say to my clinic, first thing I tell them, please have a summer crop first. Then there is one oil which allow this person not to get this sinus settling. It is nothing but a change of environment inside the skin system. That's what this is. It's nothing deep. So if you can correct that and correct your food, especially fermented items, milk products, and some kind of non-vegetarian items, this thing has to be avoided for some time. To bring it, what I told you, to bring the body, see, body has got tremendous capacity to bring back its normalcy. Only thing, you are bombarding with wrong thing continuously, it is not able to. So my duty is to find out what are the bombarding that you are doing, remove it, let body equips, and we improve the immunity of innate immunity, then it settles. Sometimes simple oil application on head before bath will settle it. They may not need any medicine at all. But one has to see, but this is what this is the approach we have in this country. And I get many patients with chronic rhinitis. It's not very common, especially youngsters between 16 and 30, I can see it's more.
Yes.
And Lolita, you can tell your son that whatever Dr. Gangadharan suggests to avoid is only for a period of time, and then he can eat it and it will not bother him. Because I've seen that with my own experience. I've had to avoid a few items for a fairly long time, but then now it's all good. Now I can eat it every now and then, in moderation, of course. That's the key.
Thank you so much.
Doctor.
Good evening, doctor. What is the origin of Ayurveda in India, doctor? The origin of Ayurveda in India.
Yeah, if you ask the origin, we say it is Anadi. There is no starting, and Anandam, it has no end. But the literary origin of Ayurveda is something around 5000 BC. The first rudimentary principles of Ayurveda seen in Rig Veda and Atharva. These are two basic texts. If you ask me the written origin of Ayurveda, these are the texts which talks about plant science uses. But that time it is not as rigor as Ayurveda science. The first Ayurveda originated as per Ayurveda history in the Ganges plain, in Ganges terrain, in Himalayan terrain, that area where few groups of stalwarts of that time came together and established science. That's the first book of Atraya Samhita came from that. From Atraya Samhita, the second book of Bharadwaja improved it, and Charaka redacted it, and we have got first text of Ayurveda. So chronologically, as per the Western historians, Ayurveda is 5,000 years old, but that is the literature available, especially the Bower's manuscript, which was excavated after post-independent period by Britishers, just before independence. That gives a lot of history about Ayurvedas. That also goes beyond the Vedic period, near to the Vedic period. So this Ayurveda is not one echo center. It has been there in different parts of the country. So the Ayurveda which you see, for example, Ashtanga Hridayam, which is very popular in Kerala, came in between 2nd and 5th century AD, whereas Susra Samhita came between 2000 and 3000 BC, and Shankara Samhita, one of the latest texts, came in 17th century. So it has been evolving and more planned. When the first book of Ayurveda had only 500-600 plants explained for health-related needs, and whereas latest book has got more than 2,000 plants. So origin is not very clearly fixed, but we say it is old as our civilization. So I think Ayurveda is one of the contribution of India's civilization to the world.
Dr. Ayurveda has a lot of effects. Can you help us with that, or what are the effects that it has? Like, sort of, is it true that it has a lot of effects? Ayurveda has a lot of effects. Is it true?
Rohini, do you mean side effects?
Yeah, side effects, like, sort of, yeah.
No, side effects. See, side effect, if you define properly, if a medicine is used for a particular condition, for a particular context, rightly, there will be no side effect at all. But everything and anything in the universe is either medicine, is a food, is a poison, and as well as also it is a amrit. So if depending upon how you use it, if you use the wrong, even for example, we use the cobra venom for eye treatment. We convert it into a completely different thing after processing. There is a great method of processing. We call that the Ayurveda Vaishya Kalpana. So if you ask me that cobra venom is not properly processed, it can be having side effect. But if properly do, there is no side effect. So if it depends upon how you use it. A properly used medicine will have no side effects at all. That's why I told you in the beginning, Ayurvedic medicines are medicines with intelligence. It works appropriately at appropriate places with appropriate intensity.
Gigi, there's a question in the chat box. It's relevant to everyone listening today. In today's pandemic, how can we use Ayurveda to enhance our well-being?
Yeah, I have been telling, and we actually made a small note also on this, how to improve your immunity and how to innate immunity, not specific immunity, so that you are able to, for example, all this why we are all breathing in and breathe out many of these bacteria even today, but why everyone is not getting it, or only few sectors are getting, because of immunity at compromise. So Ayurveda says about immunity boosting. So I give them a group of medicines, simple herbs which is available in the kitchen. Take it every day as a decoction, and take things like Chyawanprash, which is highly immunity, and Brahmarasanam. These two are highly immunity enhancing things which you can take daily. We used to have this method, this practice of taking rasayanas in the winter. In earlier time, children used to be given. That system has gone. So that we are pumping a lot of junk food, and junk food are the actually first enemy of our health. It completely changes your gut flora. Gut flora's character changes. Once gut flora changes, it becomes the place for other things to grow, all the pathogens to grow. So first you clear, and also yearly once or twice cleansing your body. We used to do this Bhedi Marindu Kodakada. This Bhedi or a cleansing your bowel has been a practice in India. All cultures I have seen. So immediately after the rainy season, we do it. and I am treating many people with chronic conditions. First thing I do is cleanse themselves. So that is one way you should do it. And there are other methods like gargling, steaming. That's all specific to organism. But my advice is to eat fresh from home, eat lot of vegetables and fruits, simply baked vegetables, and don't think that spices are your enemies. Spices are good for certain purposes, especially soft spices like dhania, jeera, haldi, long, pepper. All these things should be there. All your food should have all the 6 tastes. So there are 6 tastes through which we take things inside. So 6 tastes should be there in a combination. And eat moderately. Don't eat too much. Don't eat less also. Taking every now and then upasam also is not a good thing. And depending upon your prakriti, manage your food. That also is important. It's not as
The rasayana you can recommend for everyone, like, regardless of dosha.
Yeah, the Brahma Rasayanam and Chyawanprash are the 2 rasayana. Brahma Rasayana, especially people with little bulky body, which is a Kapha Prakriti for Brahma Rasayana, is most suitable for them. So it is available in the good pharmacies are making like Kottakkal, Coimbatore, Nagarjuna, Vajra. And you can take it every day. Rasayana should be taken either in the morning, empty stomach, or night, bedtime. Ideally followed a good half cup of milk so that it get completely digested. Rasayana is one thing I always advise people, but no rasayana should be taken more than 3 months at a stretch. Should always give a break, otherwise it will become like a food or ahars, or it will not work. So give a break, then after that you take for 1 month or so.
That's true about Tripura also, right? When used as a
But
digestion.
also, anything if you take continuously for long, it loses its action. Body becomes used to it, and body will not recognize it as a medicine, it will recognize as a food. That's why we don't give any medicine, even rasayana also more than 3 months.
Okay.
We change it.
So Dr. Gangadharan, you have left us with absolutely, it's been a riveting discussion. I think we can go on talking to you for many, many hours, but I think everybody should buy your book and read it, because I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom in your book. So, to reach a state of anandam, as you have said, we need to do many things and maybe change our lifestyle. Eat local is one of the things. And for the ladies and the gents who are listening, probably you've given us 2 things to age gracefully or to live longer, and that is to exercise and to have an oil massage every day. So ladies, please take those tips. So
at least once in a week, at least that will be practical these days, but it's very good. You enjoy it once you start doing it.
right.
You don't have to
One
go to a
more
place, you can do self-doing it also.
Right.
Caroline has a question, Shanti.
Okay, Caroline, can you just ask your
Yes,
question?
it's a very quick
Because we're
question.
coming
Good
almost
evening.
to the end.
Sure, Shanti. Good evening, doctor. Like Shanti said, thank you for this informative and educational session. It's much needed actually right now. Doctor, you were actually referring to a lot of oils and Brahma Sayanam, Chyawanprash. Chyawanprash, of course, is locally available. But these other Ayurvedic medicines and oils, where can one get it in Bangalore, doctor? There
are many thousands of outlets. I will suggest for South Indian preparations, Ayurveda Kottakkal has got openings. Ayurveda Pharmacy, Coimbatore. You just go to Google search, put your medicine name, you see hundreds of pharmacies supplying it. But go for good traditional pharmacies that is give the best product. Bangalore is available. I know at least thousands of outlets are there.
Okay, doc. Any place you would recommend? Because I know Google, if you go, it recommends many places. But since we are not sure the authenticity of these places or the oils,
to Ramaya, because we hold all these reputed pharmacies medicine only. We don't take. I give to my patients, so you can come there. Or there are many places. I recommend Ayurveda Kottakkal products. I recommend Ayurveda Pharmacy Coimbatore products. I recommend Vaidyaratnam and Siddharam and other North Indian companies. This Dhut Paveshwar is very good. So I go by the manufacturers, because there are traditional houses who are ethically sound and their products only, because we don't have much standards otherwise. So we go by this manufacturer. For classical products, there are many proprietary products which depends upon the physician's understanding of that product. But this pharmacies we can very happily go. They are all good products.
Sure,
There are
doctor.
many,
Sure, doctor.
many outlets are there. In case if you don't get any of the medicine, let me know. I can help you.
Sure, doctor. Thank you so much. Very helpful, doctor. Thank you.
Dr. Gangadharan, your book is available in Catholic Club, or is it available online or anywhere?
Online it's available, I am sure. Amazon, it's already people are buying, I am told. I didn't see. This is being done by the Penguin people. I don't have much idea where they are making it available. I hope they will tell you. So I have got only 2 copies with me now.
Oh, okay.
I hope I'll get more copies now.
Okay.
They are making it almost all the good book shops in Bangalore, and online also it is available.
Okay. So we have come to the end of this, wonderful session, and Dr. Gangadharan and Dr. Sujata Shetty, on behalf of the Managing Committee of Catholic Club, as well as the Eyebrows Subcommittee, and on behalf of all of us here, I want to thank you for this informative discussion. So thank you so much, and we do hope we can meet you sometime in Catholic Club also, maybe in better times and healthier times. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you for all of you for joining us, and I enjoyed the conversation with Sujata Shetty and you. All of you, thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dr. Sujata.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you,
and
Doctor.
Catholic Club. Bye-bye.
Thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.